Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. We just talked about the Lakers-Nuggets game that took place last night. Now, this was the second of an unbelievable national TV doubleheader because right before that game tipped off, we had some late game dramatics in New York as the Knicks knock off the 76ers in a fascinating way to extend their lead to 2-0 in this series against Philly. This did have a little bit of a similar feel, I feel like, in terms of the Lakers and the Sixers sort of needing a game like this if they wanted a chance to win the series. And after having it sort of in their grasp, letting it slip through the cracks does hurt them. They could have taken a game on the road. They had the opportunity to, and they end up blowing it late. But in this instance, it wasn't them building up a 20-point lead. It was them having a 5-point lead with 30 seconds left in the game. The 76ers, that is. Jalen Brunson ends up knocking down a corner three to make it a 2-point game. Philly goes to inbound it. Kyle Lowry sort of rushed the inbounds pass. He gets it to Maxey, who is swarmed by both Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart. He ends up hitting the ground. Hart rips it away from him. And the Knicks actually missed their first attempt as Dante DiVincenzo couldn't knock down the three-pointer. But Isaiah Hartenstein, who has been an animal for New York this season, he grabs the offensive rebound. They reset, and DiVincenzo knocks down the second attempt. Philly calls a timeout. They actually get a pretty good look to, again, at this point, it's a 1-point Knicks lead. The 76ers still have a great chance to win this game. Nick Nurse draws up a play where it's Tyrese Maxey starting in the backcourt. He ends up flying up the court. We know the type of acceleration that he has. He gets himself to the rim past the defense, but again, it's Isaiah Hartenstein making the big hustle play, coming from behind and blocking the shot. OG Anunoby ended up sealing the game on some free throws. Embiid got not a great look. He ended up with a heave to try and tie the game, but that doesn't fall, and the Knicks win 104-101. But a lot of sort of controversy and drama coming with the end of this one for a couple reasons. A lot of it sort of slanted in favor of the 76ers because of the fact that it looked like Nick Nurse was sort of hedging the line of whether or not he wanted to call a timeout. He was sort of had his hands up ready for it, but I don't think he actually officially called it at one point. During the inbounds pass itself, you almost saw him pull his hands away as if he thought it was clean and he didn't want the timeout at that point. But then Maxey gets tied up in this situation, and by the time he was looking to call that timeout again officially, I mean, it was very bang, and the refs are obviously watching the play itself. So it's, I don't know, up to your interpretation whether or not you think the 76ers got the short end of the stick on this one. I feel like it wasn't maybe necessarily the cleanest look for the refs, but the 76ers are now filing a grievance with the NBA for the way that this played out. They think that Tyrese Maxey was fouled on the inbounds and the fact that they had tried to call the timeouts. Ultimately, I was sort of okay with just letting it play out how it did. Nick Nurse, if he wanted the timeout, he had the opportunity with Lowry with the ball inbounding to sort of reset if he didn't initially like the look. And for Maxey himself, while he's on the ground, I feel like at that point, can't let the ball up. Even just hold on as tight as possible. Make it a jump ball, if anything. But you can't have it stripped from you in this type of an instance. So, I don't know. Let me know if you think. I feel like this is just sort of the situation where in late games, the refs should be less involved. Now, I also understand not making a call is in some sense a call as well. So I don't feel super definitively on it either way, but I don't feel like the 76ers were necessarily, totally it's definitely a conversation, but I wouldn't say that they solely lost because of the referees. They still had a, great chance in this game, and they just sort of let it fall apart for them, where they had the upper hand for a lot of the night. They led the entire first half. They led through most of the third quarter. The Knicks ended up taking a lead at the end of it, but in the fourth quarter, Tyrese Maxey really started getting himself going. He was incredible in this game. I thought he was the best player on the court, at least from his performance last night. But he ended up giving the 76ers the lead with a couple minutes left, operating that two-man game with Joel Embiid. Used Embiid as a screener to get himself a look in the mid-range, and then he got a three after running a possession where, again, it was just Maxey and Embiid. Maxey was actually sort of stonewalled by Josh Hart initially, but he ended up passing it into Embiid. Hart overhelped there, and that opened up Maxey for a deep three-pointer to put them up four with a couple minutes left. He scored 15 points in that final quarter, put up 35 points, 10 assists, and 9 rebounds on the night. And this was with him being questionable headed into the game because he was dealing with an illness. So he got a little bit of his flu game on. And again, I thought he was the best player in this game individually. And again, in terms of Philadelphia not being able to capitalize on a situation, it was another underwhelming Jalen Brunson night. He was off once again. He was 8 of 29 from the field in this game, following up on his 8 of 26 performance in game 1. Now, Brunson did hit the corner 3 with about 27 or so seconds left, so he ends up having the big shot and all is well, but this was a situation where the 76ers really just needed to capitalize and they weren't able to. Quickly, though, I do want to just sort of throw it out there. I know that a lot of people are very anti-Tobias Harris, and I definitely would not consider myself his number one fan, but something that did sort of stick out to me late in this game was the fact that Brunson got Harris switched onto him on 4 different possessions in those final 4 minutes, and Tobias Harris led him to going 0 of 4 on those possessions. So I thought he deserved some credit for that. But either way, with Brunson here, I think that Knicks fans should be looking to spin this in a positive light. The fact that they're up 2-0 in the series against a solid Philadelphia team, despite Jalen Brunson's play, means that I can't imagine this level of inefficiency would continue, throughout their entire playoff run. The Knicks are the better team, so, they have the edge in this series in particular, and I'm just not ready to count out Brunson as a whole after the type of season that he had. But that being said, as they continue on a postseason run and they're forced into facing more difficult competition, they are absolutely going to need him in order to be considered a true contender. It's been encouraging to see them pull out these games without the elite Brunson play that we know he can give, and there's just going to be a certain point where they can't sort of muddy things up. Some of the role players, it was awesome to have them establish themselves, start off the series at home at Madison Square Garden to get themselves going, but that's only going to take them so far. They're already down Julius Randle, their second leading scorer. They're going to need Brunson. Cannot make that more clear. But one thing that I guess, again, I think Brunson's going to bounce back. But if things weren't to, maybe you could have some sort of a storyline going on here. He is a lead guard. He's a little bit on the smaller side. He has been tasked so heavily this season with carrying the offensive load and lifting up this team and, putting together a 50-win season. But we have seen in the past certain guards sort of tire out in the postseason after being asked to do so much in the regular season. Some recent examples that just came to the top of my mind when sort of kicking around this idea were Isaiah Thomas during his prime seasons on the Celtics, and one of the most notorious postseason chokers, if you want to label him that, in James Harden, where, usage-wise, he has been, during those prime years in Houston, I don't think there was a player that was asked to do more for their team during the regular season. They even got rid of a center at one point, and he was one of their leading rebounders, just being asked to sort of initiate everything for them. But again, I wouldn't go that direction yet. Feel like it takes, a couple more of these performances from Brunson before we sort of dive into that conversation as a whole. But like I said, the role players for New York have been massive for them up to this point in the series. We've seen Josh Hart put together a couple really impressive performances early on. The late game threes in game 1, in this game 2, the 76ers actually sort of changed up their strategy after being willing to leave Josh Hart wide open for game 1, and he ultimately made them pay. But in this game, it almost seemed like it gave Hart a little bit of an edge, and it gave him some confidence, especially how things played out late. I feel like this was a prime example of being able to thrive off of the home court energy, which, by the way, Madison Square Garden has been tremendous in terms of energy up to this point. As much as, as a Boston fan, I can't say that I'm a Knicks fan by any means, but New York is a different environment when that team is good, and it's, definitely in the top 2. I would say Oklahoma City was also a tremendous environment, game 1 as well. But again, home court advantage for the Knicks. They've had Hart step up, went 4 of 7 from 3 in this second game, finished with 21 points and 15 rebounds. He was pulling up in transition from 3, knocking it down. I thought that he was really impressive. But again, don't let those 15 rebounds also fly under the radar as well. One of the best rebounders in the league, at least considering his height. But on the note of rebounding, also Isaiah Hartenstein, who I've already given some love to in this show already. Just the hustle plays and second chance opportunities he creates for this Knicks team is so impactful. He ends up being thrown into a bigger role this season due to Mitchell Robinson being injured, and he has absolutely thrived in it. He's now getting starting minutes for them, and he's making a legitimate big-time impact. Already talked about the offensive rebound and block that he had late in this game, but just the physicality he's been playing with against Embiid while they're matched up in these first 2 games has been really impressive. Obviously, playing against somebody of Joel Embiid's stature who's been so dominant, especially in recent years, can be a little intimidating, but Hartenstein sort of understands that, especially at this point with the vulnerability of Embiid because he's not fully healthy, he has an edge on certain instances. And, there were a couple offensive possessions I really liked from Hartenstein where he was looking to go after Embiid a little bit more. Not that he's necessarily posting him up back to the basket, but he doesn't seem scared of Embiid either, where he also had a couple big-time push shots in the fourth quarter as well with Embiid nearby him. So I think that he's been extremely impressive for them as well. You had Bogdanovich and McBride playing some big minutes for them, making some plays specifically at the beginning of the fourth quarter to help set the tone and make sure the crowd was still into it there. But just talked about Joel Embiid not being fully healthy. Now, this is something we already talked about at length yesterday, so I'm not going to dive into all of that again. Embiid, it's still impressive what he's able to do, considering he basically has one leg. It seems like during some of these moments, puts up 34 points, so he wasn't bad in my eyes. He still is a very impactful player, but it's just a matter of, you can see he's not all fully there, And when the Knicks are making these types of hustle plays and having the slight edge in the rebounding department, I do think that that is at least partially due to the fact that Embiid is not 100% healthy. He isn't fully mobile. I think that he only had 1 rebound in the second half last night. So, Embiid still provides a lot of good. Again, the scoring output is there, not quite as effective as we've seen him, especially in recent years. He was able to operate the two-man game with Tyrese Maxey as well, but ultimately it really just is a shame for the 76ers and for NBA fans in general, even if you're not the biggest fan of sort of the style of play that Embiid puts out there. He is, one of the most dominant players we've seen in recent history, and we just haven't been able to see how that fully translates to the playoffs, considering the fact that he's always dealing with these injuries. I wouldn't say, we have a lot of big time what ifs in the history of the sport that were, injuries cut short and never fully got a chance to develop. I feel like we've seen just about, at times at least, the maximum version of Joel Embiid, and we got MVP Embiid last season. We had 35 points per game Embiid for the first half of this year. So it's not like it's one of those things of what would he look like if he were a fully finished product. We've seen that, but the what if with Embiid sort of surrounds, what if he could just actually be healthy in the playoffs? What would that look like? We don't really have the answer, and I don't feel great about Philly's chances. I like their chances more than I like the Lakers' chances to come back, but at the same time, I feel like they are in a very difficult position. Now, there are things that can sort of turn around here. A lot of their bench players have sort of been ineffective. Again, I touched on it yesterday. Buddy Hield, and just the way that he hasn't actually been even really attempting the three-point shots that they brought him in for has definitely hurt them at times, and they need to find ways to win these non-Embiid minutes, or at least limit them, and that has not been working up to this point. But let me know what you think on Philly's chances, if there are any types of adjustments, because I think that Nick Nurse is a great coach. I feel like he is capable of making in-game adjustments and putting on different game plans. I don't think it's just Jalen Brunson not being good. I feel like the 76ers are, specifically applying different looks to Brunson to force him off of his game, and I give him credit for that, but I'm just not totally sure how much better this gets for Philly down the stretch of this series. But again, if you feel differently, definitely feel free to let me know in the comment section. But we're going to be taking our second break here, and when we come back on the other side, we will be diving into a little bit of the Cavaliers Magic series that also just wrapped up their second game last night. So stick with us, and we will be right back with more on that.